Yes, Alex!
It's episode 261, View from 202. After two playoff games in this 2023 season, the Red Bulls have won their wild card game against Charlotte FC by a score of 5-2. And they've played their first game against Cincinnati FC in a 3-game series.
Maybe 2 games.
Best of 3 series.
Yeah.
They lost their first game 3-0 away at Cincinnati, and we're playing our second game this Saturday. So, kind of a first time podcast, first time that we've ever, podcasted in between a best of 3 series like this, where it's not like a first leg, second leg. But before we get to that, it's the four of us, per usual setup. Charlotte beat them 5-2 at home. And who else but Elias Manuel with the hat trick.
The salad man himself.
That's true.
History is a circle. I fucked whatever the cliche is about something being a circle.
Time is a flat circle.
Time is a flat circle.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But salad can be a flat circle, I guess. I don't know.
It's
served in a flat circle.
It's like one of those things where it's become so like abstracted, the salad concept, that I've forgotten its original
author.
Prophet, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
I do think I wish I had just actually read the full Gustavo Guimaraes quote or excerpt for that, but I think we did it justice still. Elias Manuel, of course, is the progenitor of I saw a salad, I thought must be salad. And boy, was it salad last week? I don't know.
He ate like it was salad.
The man hits a hat trick. And I didn't know he could do that,
Did you know that was allowed?
Yeah. Is this... So my question for this game, 5-2, a good showing, a nice little beatdown. Almost kind of reminds me of when we beat Chicago 3-0 in that 2017 play-in game.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
When we were the 7th seed. Although, that season in 2017, there was a real feeling that the team was like actually still pretty solid, but then was limping through the last final game, month or two this season. Because
Open Cup,
and we like almost definitely weren't missing the playoffs. And I think the team was a little bit nihilistic about the nature of the playoffs.
And it was also like a slight rebuild year under Marsh, because they had gotten rid of Dax and were blooding Tyler in, and damn it, that kind of does remind me though that Chicago series, or that wasn't even a series, it was a play-in game, that the play-in game concept is a little bit more recent than the 3-game concept.
Yeah, that was a 7 versus 6 seed play-in. But that was a game where we went to Chicago and we won 3-0, and it kind of felt like a statement game in reasserting that they were better than their record, suggesting they were a more serious kind of playoff team. And at that time it was coming off the heels of a Shield winning season and a second place and a runner-up season after the terrible start. So it's interesting to have that kind of vibe from this game. A team that has really struggled, or this season, this squad, a team that has really struggled to assert itself and find its soul, in the last couple seasons, putting a nice little 5-2 beatdown on Charlotte, a team that I guess we've historically had good results against, but have also had a couple of like ho-hum draws. I would say it's mostly a mediocre kind of back and forth.
The last win was also Elias Manuel.
That's
scoring.
true. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was like the first team he scored against, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's something, I don't know what the exact number is off the top of my head, but it's goals, like, right? It's something like, like the vast majority of his goals for the club have been against Charlotte now.
He has like, 8 goals total?
Well, yeah, that's kind of,
part of the 5 joke. Of them are from Charlotte, at least.
Yeah. Is this a case of like, were we playing better from head to toe, or is this a case of just the team finishing unusually well on the type of performances.
I was going to say, particularly, I'm not sure which sequence goal it was, but it was. Oh, well, I mean, yeah, I'm not sure which number goal it was, but it was the one where Manuel just kind of got it in the box and just curled it over Kalina to score.
His second goal.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's what I was kind of leaning towards what it was. But anyway, that one in particular was, and I'm like not even trying to be hyperbolic or whatever, that some of the worst defending I've ever seen at the professional level, at any professional level by Charlotte. Just complete, like the fact that Manuel, I mean, mind you, it was, good composed finish, but the fact that Manuel just is able to pick up the ball in the box with zero people within even like 10 yards of him, even closing down, and he can literally just pick a spot. Apparently Manuel said that he dreamed that the night before, which I guess he
good for him.
I guess he like, had the psychic abilities to see how bad Charlotte was going to be on the day. Cause
God gave him the power to be striker for the New York Red Bulls.
I guess. I was going to say, it was ordained by God. It was Elias Eric Adams Manuel.
Yeah. But yeah, I guess that was all just to kind of, build up the case that maybe, I mean, mind you, there's a lot of shitty teams in MLS, and Charlotte, still made the playoffs above a lot of them, and presumably are able to, put some competent performances together pretty often. And this was just pretty shambolic from them in the first half. It's not like they haven't played us before. I mean, like we were just mentioning, they've kind of kept us tight in most of their games since they've been in the league. But this was just, shocking.
They were just like playing into everything. Kind of.
Oh yeah, they were getting baited on every kind of movement, and
they were just really bad at passing in the middle.
Kind of yeah. Oh, they were like, being super sloppy and super reckless about their passing.
Super sloppy, but super ambitious at the same time. It's like, why are you trying passes like that against what's going to happen? It's almost like they're throwing.
And that's the thing where, like, I think I said it on the show last week, where it's like I remember, even in the first game last year where Manuel scored and beat them, that they still looked like, I think I described them as kind of like a pretty common type of MLS team that plays like, solid, well-rehearsed football, but then just doesn't really have the quality to put it together on the end. This team that showed up on Wednesday was not that. They looked just terrible. I mean, mind you, Red Bulls were just feeling it. I mean, the Tolkien free kick goal, the Tolkien free kick goal was just pure confidence right there. Exactly. I mean, that's a goal that you just score when you're rolling.
You have that shot,
and you're just kind of unconscious. Yeah. And you're just rolling in this game with no pressure. And those, that kind of goal is so much easier to pull off in that situation. And that just was, the exclamation point, obviously. And just, symptom of what happens when a team is just offering zero resistance, and is just, like Peaches was just saying, even giving you confidence when they're attacking because they're giving it away, or just, giving you the ball in such easy positions.
Right. I will say though, to give us credit, it very much felt like the boys, for the first time in months, maybe years, were playing a meaningful game.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's like the intensity at the beginning from like the New York Red Bulls felt familiar to me. It felt like the club I grew to love almost a little bit. But yeah, like I do think like that had a big effect in like the way that we approached the game too. Like Charlotte was not up for the moment at all. And like our passing was generally a little bit crisper than it's been through the season. And it feels like the type of game that could have happened maybe once or twice over the course of the season if, like
there was
something to play for. And then, like the boys could have just like gotten that little bit of focus to curl a shot around the keeper, stuff like that just wasn't coming together during the season. Obviously, I feel like this continues the feeling of like, oh, this is what a regular season result in this season should have been. Like maybe against Charlotte, like this felt like it what it was, but like there was meaning behind the game. The boys like had some intensity. They had some motivation. For the first time, it actually felt like there was some purpose behind like the way that we were attacking. Like we're making tackles with extra, effort from a lot of guys who I haven't seen before. But yeah.
Well, and there's the other end of it too, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit in last week's show, and then also there were some people like, civilians who were noticing online that there is a dynamic too of where obviously there's the history of tripping up in the playoffs, especially during the best seasons that this club's had in recent times. And there was kind of an opposite dynamic, going into this playoffs of, we kept saying house money and no stakes and all that kind of stuff, but that was kind of like legitimately the context, and that can be kind of liberating as, it seems like the team had their mindset on it that way on Wednesday. So the fact that nobody's really expecting anything and there's not that weight and there's not that pressure means that, this is a team that doesn't really have anything to risk, or even like a reputation to risk, since nobody was obviously very impressed by what they did during the regular season. So, it can work both ways, obviously. And, it's not, kind of a blanket thing where you're supposed to do better when you have a shitty season, but when you can kind of bottle that, it can be sort of explosive, as we saw against Charlotte.
Yeah, and it very feels like it's the potential, like it's a new season almost. If you have a shitty season, I guess that's the one merit of barely
kind of like a dead cat bounce.
Yeah, like sneaking into the playoffs is that, oh hey, this is the season now. I think everyone can focus for however many games for this next month to try to make a real run at it. It feels a little refreshing. I think overall the spirits of watching this club, but also maybe I'm catching a little bit of playoff fever in that sense, where it's I feel myself wanting to root for the team a little bit more because they seem like they're a little bit more motivated too.
I did have that thought at halftime that if there's any team that would be totally inoculated against, that's so Metro type stuff, it would probably be this one. And it's sort of the silver lining from something that we bemoaned quite heavily on this podcast, which was the sort of methodical, consistent degrading of standards at the club, first through the Armas era, which was sort of the vibe of, oh, what? We're just trying our hardest. What do you expect? Do you expect us to be in first every week? And then, in turn, the Struber era, which was a more sinister, you're literally stupid if you expect this team to win. By going through those two sieves, we've ended up having a squad and I think club that is sort of divorced from any sort of expectations. And now, when they're up 3-0 at halftime, I'm actually not too worried that they're going to start thinking about previous failures. This is no longer really the club of Dax Felipe or Henri or Sasha or even BWP. BWP comes around and visits still, but that there's really no feeling of continuity with that. The club has kind of completely detached itself, mostly for worse, but maybe, we could say this is a silver lining. Do I think it's going to do I think that it outweighs the the fact that maybe we've shed a little bit of that weight of expectation and that so Metro kind of playoff vibe is worth it to have such a crappy regular season as the norm? No, probably not, but we'll see. We'll enjoy it for the rest of this run as much as we can, I think. And it's an interesting dynamic to note.
Would we forget? Maybe I guess this is too early of a question to ask, but would we forget such a bad regular season so quickly if we had a successful postseason?
Well, what is successful? Actually,
if we won the whole thing.
Yeah, but maybe
that would serve. That would certainly be something we would have to reconcile. But I think short of that, I don't think there's a lot that changes.
Yeah, get into the cup.
It is an interesting question of what would be a successful run.
I think I feel like we've kind of had this framework recently anyway, where I think if there is one structural thing at stake, and I think it's been kind of resolved by, or not resolved, but just, kind of settled by the results in the last few weeks, it's probably whether Lessane's going to get the permanent job or not. And that seems probably locked in at this point. I don't see how they would be able to turn around and ditch him after this run of results, and like we've kind of touched on the way he's carried himself during it, and especially with the Cincy game, we're gonna not especially with the Cincy game, but especially with the Charlotte game, I meant to say, is kind of the exact sort of tone that you would want to get to have that happen. So I feel like that sort of being by the wayside now, as I think it is, sort of takes away anything short of winning the cup that would actually kind of change redeem or change the direct trajectory that was already sort of in place in the last few weeks of the season when playoffs were maybe on a question. But
right. I guess like
there's still a lot, winning MLS Cup would be weird. And like I said, it would have to be, calculated about. But, short of that, there's still a lot of work to do.
Right. Which is to say that on the show that it's a given that just making playoffs is not that, which is obvious. Right. Yeah. Right. We've definitely made that clear. But
now I'm considering the question of like what even would be considered a successful playoff run. Short, obviously winning the cup by definition is a successful playoff run.
But like the announcers did make, I guess, comparisons to that 2008 run where like they made the cup final.
But that's an interesting comparison too, because how often do we think about that season? Granted, it's a little bit before our time, but even amongst the older fan base, the fan base that was around at the time, that's not that memorialized of a run.
I mean, to me, the 2008 Red Bull New York season is like the Roman Empire. I think about it quite a bit.
Well, that's funny because I think the Western Conference trophy that we won in that run is literally like
in the rafters somewhere.
Nobody knows where it is. It's not on display, and I don't know if anyone is like asked if anyone knows where it is. But
well, and that 08 was especially, I mean, even by 2000s MLS standards, where like there were only like 10 teams in the league, and everybody was kind of like pretty spotty. That was a pretty like mid to you could even say bad regular season that year too. I mean, to the extent that we were competing in the Western Conference bracket, like it was nobody was really expecting anything, and nobody was really it wasn't even considered that much of an accomplishment that they even made it all the way there, especially since they lost, considering how kind of fluky the league was back then. So, you're saying I feel like it probably should be approached or should be assessed the same way, even if they make it kind of all the way to the final this year.
Yeah, you're saying it's going to be a lead up to a Colorado Rapids-esque championship eventually.
Oh, well, certainly. Again, I mean, if we had won in 09, it would have been that would have been the punchline instead of the Rapids as like, anybody can just fluke up and win MLS Cup.
Yeah. I do think looking at something a little bit less extreme than winning the cup, maybe something that would represent a real new watermark could be if we get out of the hole, if we come back against Cincinnati and move on to the next round, and we would play the winner of Philadelphia and New England. And presuming that Philadelphia, they won the first game, if Philadelphia advanced, and then we were to vanquish Philadelphia in that matchup, that would like, tone wise, like kind of be a nice shower for like all of our recent woes, and could be potentially a real inflection point for the club.
Jim Curtin's been a real side villain too.
Right.
Yeah, he's built it up.
Yeah. So, and that's not, and I hope it's clear that we're not like predicting anything like that would happen. But like just in potential opportunities of something shorter, more achievable than just the cup. That could be another benchmark that we hit. That said, should we talk about the Cincinnati series then, this first of 3?
Well, I was gonna say that I thought this, like, us talking about maybe the Colorado thing championship was a good segue into talking about format again, because now that we have witnessed maybe like it is related to the Cincinnati game, but just like the way that the stakes are driven into the postseason into like crowning a champion does seem like a little odd now that we've seen like the difference in formats within its own tournament.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about, I think, the Cincinnati game before we go all in on format, but it does remind me what you were saying about this being the first competitive game that the teams played, honestly, all year in terms of having stake moment.
Yeah.
And we were just stuck in limbo that whole time. It's also funny, before we move on from Charlotte completely, we did give up like a random Golasso overhead kick that ended up being irrelevant. So always funny when that happens. Right. So 3-0 against Cincinnati. I guess to your point about format, this is an interesting game because, the goals, the aggregate does not count. It's just like it's a baseball series or a basketball series.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you get blown out or not.
Shake it off. Play the next game.
Right.
I thought you were going to go into a full Taylor.
Shake it off. Yeah, I mean, it's relevant. We need Taylor in MLS.
We have to monetize this podcast.
Song of the summer.
What, 2016?
No, we were in college.
Yeah.
For that, I remember distinctly when that came out. I think it was must have been summer 2014.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Anyway, when's she going to re-record that, huh?
Yeah, when's the Taylor's version of Shake It Off?
Yeah. 3-0. The biggest change to our lineup in this match is that Daniel Ottoman was injured. What is he injured with? Is he
a knock?
A knock? Yeah, because he was on the bench. So Drew Yearwood.
DFA Wayne Rooney suspension. Partying too hard. He's too young to do some of the dirtier references.
I'm really hesitating here. Really double clutching. So Drew Yearwood steps in. And is this a story of just individual mistakes, getting punished on individual mistakes, or is this us getting outmatched? I have an opinion.
I'm leaning towards the latter.
A little bit of both.
Really? Okay.
If only because, we mentioned this at the time, but the game last month, or was it even earlier this month, I guess, that we went to Cincinnati and got that result after they had the Shield. But that was them. And, that was kind of my thesis about the whole game, was that it was sort of an example, pretty precise example of what happens when you lose lineup continuity in MLS. Cincinnati, obviously the most dominating team in the league, pretty much start to finish, decided to bench, most of their spine, rest most of their spine. And sure enough, one of the lesser teams in the league steals points from them at home. Now you see the team kind of fully intact and geared up and kind of spending the last few weeks prepping for this moment, and they sort of outclassed us. I mean, it was a few, the first and last goals especially were just kind of particularly well worked and just, a quality gap. I mean, quite honestly, they just have final third players that not just Red Bulls, most of the league doesn't have. I mean, Acosta and Vasquez, they lost Brenner over the course of this year, but that's still just, lot of danger, a lot of dynamic in the final third, either, mostly on counterattack with the way Cincy plays, but they're versatile. I mean, they just have a lot of good players, and that's why they're the top team in the league, and that's why they kind of, ran the race over us in this game.
I just want the record to reflect that 1 year way back when I thought Lucho Acosta was good is finally coming back for me.
I've always thought he was real good, but just kind of
you have been saying it though for a while.
But also, I agree, we got outmatched, but I think it's particularly clear in that final third player where we just were not as sharp. Cincinnati were better defending than Charlotte were, obviously.
Right.
And Matt Miazga's harder to get past than some
NPC Charlotte defender.
Yeah, and Wodobo is, I've kind of
rate him.
I've more than rated him. I think he's probably the best, not non-creative, midfielder in the league. Just a real dominating player.
And Baji was really getting into everyone's heads.
Well, there was that kind of fanfare also, but yeah, I mean, Cincinnati's just a really good team. I mean,
the well-rounded overall, yeah.
Oh yeah,
yeah, exactly.
In every part of the field, yeah.
It was always going to be a type of game where we would have like maybe 2 or 3 chances, and we would have to be perfect in our attack. Like there was never going to be anything else. But I really felt like, and we had that chance.
We had a few, didn't we?
I thought we had more, honestly.
Well, there was like one in particular. I remember when the cross came through from Barlow, right?
Yeah.
And then like Manuel dummies it, and then Luquinhas gets the foot on it, and he just misses. And that felt like it would have been the moment to like punch him in the mouth a little bit. But it really felt like there was an opportunity in the first like 20-30 minutes where Cincinnati didn't really get settled. Like they couldn't get a groove. We were forcing them to just like, send it back to the keeper and clear it to the midfield where they couldn't put a string of passes together. And it seemed like whatever we were trying to like go out with was actually working. And I think just given that like this is Cincinnati's like big kind of moment as a club where they have such a dominating regular season, they win the Shield and they have a lot to, I think, kind of go out and prove. And I feel like in the first like 20-30 minutes, that's the best opportunity to take advantage of like how nervous they were. So no, what were you gonna say?
Well, I was gonna say, especially because like you were mentioning on this continuity thing, like we had played before they had, and they had quite a bit of a rest. So I do think that had that factor of like, oh, we really need to just smash and grab real quick because they were not.
Otherwise, they'll settle into it.
They'll settle into it. They'll get like up to speed in terms of game pace again, and then the whole series is now even. There is no more advantage. Like we just have to win on our own terms now, which is going to be hard because Cincinnati is a good team. But, like we were saying, like there are points where that matchup doesn't work well. And Cincinnati did keep like trying very dangerous passes to bypass our midfield, and we were able to intercept a lot of those. But the problem was that I thought that like our midfielders were not connecting. Really,
well, I mean, it was a pretty big deal to have to
switch
drop
Edelman. Yeah, that's what I mean, and that's I guess what I meant. Like,
I mean, to use continuity again, kind of like I think what you're saying, where it's just like a big part of the continuity that's rose our level of results over the last month or two is that they've settled on Amaya and Edelman as a midfield access, and once you drop that affects the entire rest of the formation,
right? Including how center backs communicate, right? So, I do think that had that kind of ripple effect, but like Cincinnati were still kind of playing into us. There's still like a lot of those moments, but every time we intercepted that ball, tried to get into midfield, tried to make that ball to our attackers, we're just passing to the wrong foot. We're passing a little too high. We're passing a little too short. It was just not quite sharp enough. And, I think like you're saying, that's part of the continuity of players knowing where everyone has to be, but also like, we were just a little bit more desperate against Cincinnati.
Also, not only the continuity of having to drop Edelman, but also Amaya and Yearwood in particular, I think have maybe the worst chemistry of our current group of midfielders. Not because like they don't get along or something. It's that like they
make the same runs.
They're the same. They're similar players. They make the same type of runs. Yes, they use the same kind of spaces. They do the kind of they do the same things when they receive the ball. They're always kind of guys who want to turn and carry it. And Edelman and Maya was a pretty perfect contrast as far as types of midfielders go, where Edelman is a guy who sticks at the base and kind of sprays it around and keeps it simple, whereas Amaya is the guy who carries and kind of is a little more mobile and tries different things. So I think that was just kind of a perfect storm as far as setting up the midfield. I mean, it was probably the best. If Edelman was injured, it was probably the best Lassane could probably do, because I don't know if you're getting the same level of performance out of like a Stroud, who seems like he lost gas over the course of the later part of the season. It's just kind of a conundrum that you had to deal with, and kind of like Sam just said, it was one of those things that lessened our chance to be perfect, which you had to be in a matchup like this.
And did it seem to have a knock-on effect with the center backs communicating as well? Because I mean, a lot of the mistakes in goal are kind of seem to be miscommunications.
Well, I mean, Reyes had the real bad one with that header, which, you know, and as an isolated play, yes, that's, you know, terrible and just, you know, kind of real bad mistake that you obviously can't make in a knockout tournament. But in a more global sense, I did kind of notice that Reyes was maybe, you know, Nealis to a lesser extent, but especially Reyes was kind of seeming to try and cover more ground and do more things than he might have normally done. And maybe that was kind of a ripple effect from the midfield being less organized than it usually is.
I was actually going to say what I felt like was the notably poor performance of Kyle Duncan. I feel like what Edelman does really well is probably also covers for his weaknesses. And we really saw that on display in that game.
Well, I thought I saw like a pretty standard Kyle Duncan game, which we've maligned for years. Like,
but I just mean like Kyle Duncan has, I think, looked considerably better and more like in place and more reliable in the past few games. And I wonder if like that is just because Edelman has been able to do that, and that subtraction has made it seem like very obvious now that he can't just do that, which also is why I think.
Well, and when the team's under pressure and things aren't going well, Duncan gets the impression that he has to kind of create
stuff. Yeah.
He has to create and kind of try stuff, and it, you know, doesn't work at nearly the rate that it needs to.
So, looking forward to Saturday.
Yeah, we're still in it.
Of hope. I mean, this is I think the weird thing about this format. We talked about it last week. We've been talking a lot about the format of so many teams playing or making the playoffs, creating this weird lack of drama. And now we've got this 3-game series. We're created this circumstance where late in this game when it's 2-0 and we're chasing the game. It was theoretically, but it was very odd for me to see us chase the game, but it only mattered, I guess if we scored 2 goals, we could have gone to penalties. But in a sport where it's such a normal, the normal thing is aggregate goals for multi-game fixtures. And that's even how it's been in MLS, you know, in recent history. It was so strange to be in this situation where we had to be like pushing all the way to try to score 2 or 3 goals. It almost kind of felt like it made the game over at like the 70th or minute. You know?
And I feel like even before the game was kind of decided, just the energy was different from a normal playoff game.
Yeah.
For even the normal kind of like unenthused playoff, you know, dates that Red Bulls have had the last few years. That just didn't feel like, you know, there didn't feel like, you know, this, I mean, literally wasn't that the season, you know, could end within a couple hours. You know, that's always kind of the tension that's in these games, even in the bad seasons. And he didn't really have that in this game, and he especially didn't have it
even after in the two-legged games.
You know, Cincinnati went up. What's that?
Like even in the 2-legged games.
Oh yeah, totally. Because
you
could lose goals.
You could lose it in the first game.
Yeah, right. And I mean, when you don't have it, I mean, this was kind of like Brit's saying. I mean, it was different from like, you know, obviously in the World Cup, where there's not aggregate, where it's, you know, single game matchups where theoretically, you know, once you've lost, it's over. Once it's decided, it's over. But a team's never going to give up in like a World Cup knockout game, even if they go down like 2-3-0. Yeah. Whereas this was a game where, again, like, you know, once a team's went up 2 or 3 goals, that's kind of that, and you're kind of, you know, hurting yourself if you go after it, and or, you know, if you risk too much and you know, tire yourself out. And this was kind of as the first kind of lab rat experiment in trying this, it was pretty underwhelming. It didn't feel like a very important game. It had a very, as I said online, a very kind of like April regular season midweek game kind of vibe. Especially it being on a Sunday night didn't help either.
Right.
Which that's a whole other sidebar that will make this episode even longer. But I don't get what the scheduling MLS and Apple are trying to do for this is, especially after they made such a stink about how during the regular season, like, oh, we're going to have all the games on the same night at the same time, and now they're going to have them all at random times on random days. I don't get it, but that's a whole other thing. But yeah, the fact that it was on a Sunday night did not help the gravitas either.
Yeah. I just felt like there's a moment where after 2-0 or something where it's just like, oh, we have to score in order for this game to like come to life. Even like I was rooting for the game to come to life rather than us to like win in a way. And it's just like, now that I like do a lot of, I guess, different kind of balancing stuff with game mechanics or whatever on Roblox and things like that, it just does feel like, oh, they didn't really put that much thought into like making like prioritization or like how things would be like competitive in kind of like this vacuum format, right?
Well, it's the other thing that I hadn't even considered when we were talking about it last week about, the format and how weird it is because I had mentioned last week that it would be better to just go ahead and do a group stage if you want to guarantee every team 3 games. But in this format, you're not even really guaranteeing teams 3 games, because that's the other part of the aggregate being taken out, is that if a team sweeps the first 2 games, that's that. You're not getting a third game. So I don't even get how that enters the calculations either. It's just, it feels like it's been pretty unpopular among the public too. And I think this might be the last year we see it. But in the meantime, it's really weird. It
feels like a trial, but like, the calculus of, trying to get through on this one round for it to count so much. But like it did end up feeling like a regular season matchup because it's the same priority in weight.
Yeah, it was the same kind of thing where it's just, all right, well, let's, we lost this game, let's just pack it up and lick our wounds and come back better next week. That's literally what it is. Like, which is different from the aggregate games where it's like, yeah, we now have a completely new problem to solve after whatever the score of this last game was.
Especially if like it's so unserious to like go directly to penalties for that like best like result for the best of 3 too, because it's just like if we lose 3-0, it's no different than if we had gotten away with 0-0 and lost on penalties.
Well, it's a unique thing to soccer that's pretty cool. I mean, it can be equally frustrating and really cool that, if a team's up 2-0 at home in a 2-leg aggregate series, they are, and you're heading to the last minute of the match, they're minutes away from a really solid, good victory. But the opposing team, if they score only 1 goal, is still...
That can make it feel like a victory for them.
Yeah, it can make it feel like they snatch victory, like while still losing. And to remove that...
Well, I mean,
feels really anticlimactic. I don't know.
I mean, when you have an aggregate series, it's not even 2 games. It's like 100. It's a 180-minute game. And that sort of dynamic is just completely taken out when you set it up this way.
At this point, I mean, if you're getting spanked on the road, you might as well just take out all you guys in yellow cards and just phone it in. And like, what's the point of doing that?
Right.
Like for like the spirit of the spirit of the playoffs or whatever. Like that just defeats the whole purpose.
Send Coronel up on corner kicks in the 80th minute. Who cares? Like, I don't know. It's whose idea was this? I don't know.
It seems like it's just a gross overreaction to people being like, away goal rules are kind of silly, aren't they?
I mean, there's been so many things, particularly with the way they've made some Apple decisions where, I mean, I mentioned this at when I was watching the game at a friend's house the other night, where it was just like, I legitimately feel like so much MLS policy recently is just like sketched out on a napkin, like legitimately. And then they just kind of piece together the legal language later on. But I don't think there's a lot of things that are really focus grouped and planned and, kind of consulted and thought out. I think it's literally like kind of what Brit's asking. I think it's just a few people in a room being like, let's try this.
Let's try this year. And if it doesn't work, we'll change it up again.
I just don't know how anybody approved a playoff format where there's 4 like legs to it there's 4 like whatever like, right
presumably the union signed off on it too.
Each round, but like
4 rounds, but you're playing half of your potential with the exception of the number 9 seed. You were playing 8 and 9 seeds, you were playing half of your games most likely against the team in the first round. Like that doesn't really scream, I don't know, ideal level of competitiveness for a cup.
Meaning like 3 games in that first round, and then you only have to win 3 games
3
the rest
more.
of the way. It's weird.
It's really bizarre, and it caught my eye that the league made a explainer video. I mean, I guess they probably always do that, but like they're explaining things as the playoff starts, and then like clubs communications officers are like tweeting out, they like genuinely have to inform everyone, oh, by the way, there's no extra time in any of this. And it's like, and this is not like a club specific complaint. This is just like, it doesn't seem like a good sign for the league when clubs themselves have to be like, oh, by the way, guys, playoffs are starting in like an hour and here's how they work. Like, most, the gravitas and expectation of the playoffs in most other leagues that have playoffs, have it so everyone's kind of looking forward to a little bit more than that,
Yeah, definitely.
And it's I don't know how it's gonna feel on Saturday. I am gonna try to make it on Saturday.
I was gonna say I would maybe accept group stages better if it meant that we actually play against Western Conference teams and get put into groups with them and like have like more of those games or something like that, because that's something that's just not a matchup anymore, like we were talking about last week, where the league has grown so much that we're in just our mini league, so we can actually get some like diversity in the playoffs of teams that we play, right?
Group stage could be fun, or maybe we could even do like what they do in Scotland and Austria now, or like the Championship League and
they just break it into top and lower tiers.
Honestly, it kind of almost feels this way already, But it's also the thing about that Sam raises about half of the playoff matches being in one round is also wild when considering that like we have that international break coming up, and they could be using this next 2 weeks to like do a whole nother round before that international break if they insist on.
They could even maybe do MLS Cup before the international break.
But no, we have to do potentially 3 matches in this round.
Yeah, and spread out the whole first round over like 3 weeks.
And like month, Columbus and Atlanta are playing tomorrow, and I think it's their first match.
There's I think New England or there's some other team that's like not playing their first match until maybe even next weekend.
Which is like it's like, weird to have everything so staggered.
The only way it makes sense to me, I guess, if I'm abstracting this, is also like, we're trying to maximize the amount of like time where the amount of teams are in the playoffs almost.
Right.
And that's,
or I think maybe Apple, like, it wouldn't surprise me if Apple is like, we want to maximize the amount of like time that there is an MLS game on our service.
Right.
Maybe. Yeah.
The regular season. Where they're like putting everything in the same time
or maybe slot. Maybe this is just them being like, we were overcorrected for everything.
Right.
Next year we're gonna have games at every hour of every day of the week.
Yeah. Oh my God. So how's it gonna feel on Saturday? Because there's an aspect of like we're playing our 3rd playoff game. In this playoffs. We're playing our 2nd home game. Is it gonna feel like all or nothing? I mean, it will be all or nothing on Saturday.
I think this one is like a case of a game where like there are actually
people
stakes,
also have like ample time to prepare and get to the stadium. It's going to be on a Saturday. Presumably the crowd will be decent. It's against a first place team. It's against the Shield winning team. So, you have the ingredients of this being a decent atmosphere. The atmosphere, I should say, it sounds like it was loud against Charlotte. It wasn't like the most filled, but it sounds like it was a decent atmosphere. The celebration on the goals seemed pretty raucous. This is also going to be my first game in a while, to be quite honest, that I've gone to in person. So I don't know. I mean, I still kind of am feeling this house money kind of feeling. I'm not going to feel, if we lose on Saturday, I'm not going to feel crushed. I mean, I'm sure there's a way that we might lose that makes me feel crushed, but I think the most dissatisfying or unsatisfying outcome would be if they got like a pretty normal 0-0 or 1-1 draw and then we lost in penalties. I think I'd be like, does that really deserve to end now?
Like this?
Yeah. Like, I mean, sure, they beat us on Sunday, but then like if we got, I don't know, it's
salad.
Yeah, it is salad. Elias Manuel's returned. He never left. It's always
the salad days have returned.
Yeah. Forget it, Jake. It's salad. Well,
predictions.
Yeah, is Edelman going to be fit on
He has
Saturday?
had the time. Maybe like
He was on the bench.
Yeah. So, maybe it is like the one good thing about this playoff format is that it's somehow going to save us.
Because it gives us time to recover?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Serge and Goma will finally be ready.
He's the key to all this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He is the key to all this.
The
He
key,
did play.
we have our key back.
We saw him play.
Do you see any change in personnel at right back, or is it going to be Duncan all the way?
Maybe if they feel like they have to get a result and they have to score, they
But
put Harper in.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
who knows?
Well, I was going to say if Edelman's back, then like I was saying, maybe Duncan starts like playing well again too.
The Serge Goma thing is also that I forgot that he got a few minutes, which I think also speaks to what we're talking about. Where it's like once we got to like 10 minutes left in that game.
Yeah.
What's the point of this? What are like
let's put Serge
what's
in.
going on? Yeah.
What goes on here?
What about a Julian Hall kid? Why didn't he get minutes?
Oh, so true. So true.
There's a name some of the older Red Bulls fans might remember.
Ooh, Profe had a really good one recently. He just tweeted, the only thing he tweeted was Isiar Drame. It's like, damn, wow.
That's a good one.
That's one I did not remember.
There was
Holy
also a good Profeism the other night when, Charlotte went up. He just said time for soup.
What does he mean?
It was time for soup.
Soup's on.
All right. Well, anything else about Cincinnati? I mean, I don't think we expect any personnel changes. I think we're now at a point where Elias Manuel and Barlow are legitimately just our striker pairing. Yeah. What's happened with Corey Burke? I don't know.
It's just
he had surgery.
Yeah.
He did?
Yeah.
He was live streaming, I think, during one of the games on Instagram. So I think the only thing to look out for is Drew for Edelman.
Right.
So
Stroud, I missed that Stroud played a whole half, or I forgot that Stroud played a whole half.
He's really kind of fallen out of the rotation.
Yeah.
Which I think there was a specific quotes from Lassane or somebody saying that he's gotten pretty fatigued going through his first pro season, which is fair.
Yeah, the Chris Duval effect.
Yeah.
Well, what are our expectations or hopes for Saturday?
Let's get game 3.
Game 3.
Yeah,
that's also annoying that like
it's not game 7.
Yeah, that like if we win, we just have to play again.
I mean, well, it is the playoffs, Brit. That is how
it's the same team, you know. It's not right. It's not right. We're literally we're not foreigners to this concept. We're literally watching baseball right now as we record this. All right, like we get it, but it's not right for soccer. It's just
if the entire playoffs was just a 7-game series between the best teams, maybe.
God, 7 games. Now, if they did it like in a week,
yeah, like basketball,
10 days,
just like straight.
That could be
back and forth.
I wonder what that would look like actually, like after, like by the time you get to game 5, if everyone just like running 90 minutes. Yeah, like it might actually be kind of interesting.
Well, I think the players union has it so you can't play within 24 hours.
Right.
Which is why we had the Chelsea 2 game.
Oh, but
like you can't play 2 professional matches within 24 hours of each other.
Oh, I would have thought that would have made it so we at least had to reschedule. Or I don't know.
No, we just ended up playing our 2 kids against
right.
Chelsea.
I would have thought it was just like, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But, well, all right. It's trite to ask for predictions, but I don't know how else to end this.
4-0 RBNY. Let's go. At home for the first
Who's
time.
scoring?
It's Cincinnati. So, I don't know. Frankie and Maya hat trick. And then a cheeky Reyes header.
There you have it.
You know, I did forget that how young Elias Manuel is, and seeing him actually finish did confuse me a bit. Because I was like, oh, right. Is he going to be like a real player for us? I don't know.
Find out Saturday night, Apple TV.
See you there.
It's Alex!